All right, folks, what I'd like to do now, since we have already started our genetics unit, we talked a little bit about some of the terminology that's important for us to know. I think we need to go through some more practice problems. The best way to know how to do Punnett squares is to simply just practice with those problems. It makes it much easier to understand what the question is asking for, and it makes it easier to understand how to solve the problem as well. So let's just dive right into it. Let's see what we can do with some of these Punnett square problems here. Okay, let's look at some of the information that's present here in this problem. I'm going to read it aloud to you. Brown hair is dominant to blonde hair. Cross two heterozygous individuals and determine the genotype and phenotype of offspring. So a couple things we need to understand here. First off is that brown hair is dominant to blonde hair. Alright, and we're going to cross two heterozygous individuals. And we need genotype and phenotype of our offspring. So we have our given information and we have what we need to know. So let's see what we can do here. We need to assign letters for brown hair and blonde hair. I think the easiest way to do this would just to be for big B, and we'll call that brown. And little b would represent blonde hair. Simple enough, right? Okay, well, let's see what we got. Two heterozygous individuals. We know heterozygous means one of each. So we're going to cross an individual who is big B, little b, with an individual who is big B, little b. Okay, heterozygous, remember, one of each. So we have one dominant allele and one recessive allele. Now that we know our parents, we need to draw out our Punnett square so that we can solve for this. And remember, one allele goes into each of the upper boxes, and one allele goes into each of the side boxes. All right? And then we just cross whatever's inside the box. Now, our last step is to determine genotype and phenotype of my offspring. So genotype. How many are homozygous dominant? Just this one, right? Homozygous dominant means two dominant alleles. So we're going to have one. How many are heterozygous? Hopefully you said two. And then how many are homozygous recessive? One. All right, so my genotypic ratio, we can put these as just numbers with the names outside them, homozygous, heterozygous, but sometimes it's best, it'll ask you to put it into a ratio. And to do that, we start with our homozygous dominant, heterozygous, and homozygous recessive. So our genotypic ratio here is 1 to 2 to 1. Remember, phenotype is what they look like. So how many individuals here are going to have brown hair? How many are going to express the dominant trait? 1, 2, 3. Each of these are going to express the dominant trait. So 3 dominant and 1 will express the recessive trait. So 3 to 1 is our ratio there, meaning that for every 4 children on average, we'll have 3 brown hair and 1 blonde hair. All right, so it just takes some time to go through this and understand what the question is asking for, but make sure you know the terminology. That's really important for being successful in these problems, is knowing what terms to use and what they mean as you go through these problems. Let's apply the same information to this problem. Tall pea plants are dominant to short pea plants. So tall, dominant to short. We're going to cross a homozygous dominant tall pea plant with a short pea plant. And we're still determining phenotype and genotype of our offspring. So again, we need to assign variables. Tall is dominant to short. Since it's tall, let's just use the letter T. So big T is tall and lowercase t is short. Simple enough. We have a homozygous dominant tall pea plant. So homozygous dominant, 2 dominant alleles, with a short pea plant. Now it doesn't tell me whether it's homozygous or heterozygous, but if the plant is short, it must have 2 recessive alleles, right? It's the only way it could be short, correct? So we go through the same steps we went before. We're going to draw out our Punnett square, plug in our alleles, and cross them. Again, the question is asking for phenotype and genotype. So let's do genotype first. All right. How many of our offspring are homozygous dominant, 2 dominant alleles? None, right? We have none that have 2 dominant alleles. How many are heterozygous, where they have 1 dominant and 1 recessive? 4, right? And then we have none that are homozygous recessive. Remember, genotype is the specific genetic combination. So you're looking at whether they're homozygous dominant, heterozygous, or homozygous recessive. Now, phenotype is what they look like. So how many of these are going to be tall? All of them, correct? And none will be short. Okay? So as we see here, it just takes some time, go through it step by step, and answer the questions that are given. Lastly, is it possible for 2 short pea plants to have a tall pea plant offspring? Explain. Well, let's see here. The question is asking if 2 short plants can have a tall offspring. So using the same variables we used before, remember, big T, tall, little t, short. We can go through and determine this. We have 2 short pea plants. So we have little t, crossed with little t, little t. Now, if you're smart, you don't even have to do the Punnett square. You can sit here and see what the result is going to be. However, I think it's always good to get practice crossing and using your Punnett squares, because they will get more complex and more complicated as we go through. Are any of these going to express the dominant tall trait? And the answer is no, because all of them express the recessive trait, right? All of them will be short. So hopefully you understand a little bit more about how to go through these Punnett square practice problems. That's hard to say. Punnett square practice problems, Punnett square practice problems. Go through, do the best that you can, ask me questions if you need them, and take your time with it, all right? I know you guys are smart enough to understand this. Take care, guys. We'll talk to you later. Have a great day.